Good morning, everybody. Everybody can hear me? The volume too low or too high or just right? Okay. Um, as in my last talk, I'm at Zen Center, but I'm upstairs. And then I'm going to come down after the Dharma talk's over. And maybe this will be the last time. I'm doing that because 3 or 4 of you asked me, said that you'd rather not see me when I'm muffled. You'd rather see me online. So also, there's another factor too, but I won't get into that. So anyway, good to see you all this morning. Wonderful to see you. First thing I'm going to do is put up a little screen share here. And will someone raise their hand if they can see the screen share? Good, you can see the screen share. So today and next week, I'm going to be talking, giving some conceptual background and detail about the workshop that I did yesterday, which was experiential, so I didn't talk very much. But I want to contextualize what I did in the workshop, and you don't need to have been in the workshop to do this at all. I'm going to talk about the self in early Buddhism, the first turning of the wheel, and just touch on the self in the second and third turning of the wheel, which happened 500 years later, and how they're relevant and how we practice with them. And I'm going to do that today, and then tomorrow, next Sunday, I'm going to do the little more on the second, third turning, featuring the tetralemma. So the first turning of the wheel. They call it a wheel. It's the wheel of the Eightfold Path, the wheel of life. We go on the wheel to practice. We have an aspiration. We practice and hope to enlighten our lives by practicing. So the first turning of the wheel has as its one of its key components the fiction of the self as we understand it. That instead of the fictional self that we understand, the so-called self is made up of 5 aggregates: form or contact, sensation, perception or label, impulse, and consciousness. And we have a specific event that triggers us to have a sensation, and that triggers a label. We label the sensation, the series of sensations, and that then triggers an impulse to do something, or to think something, or to feel something, and then consciousness starts talking about it, starts moving conceptually to figure it out, understand it, plan it, deal with it, remember how it's similar to another experience, etc., etc. So these 5 come together to shape our experience, according to early Buddhism. The problem is that the bottom one, consciousness, tends to take over, in case you haven't noticed. That the first 4 happen in the present moment. The consciousness is always moving around from past to future to could have to would have to should have to might have to memory, which is wonderful. It's wonderful that we have consciousness. But when it takes over all five so that we're not present anymore, that's a problem. And that's a problem for human beings. Day before yesterday, there was a cardinal in my backyard. And my eyes out the second floor window first made contact with a small red shape. That's the first one. Then I had thought cardinal. That was my label. That was my perception, cardinal. Then I had an impulse to tell my wife, Linda, cardinal. And then I thought about it. And perception label is called samajna in Sanskrit, which means together, know, jna, know. Based on my contact, based on my perception, based on my sensation, I labeled it as a cardinal. I brought the sensation and the contact together and labeled it as a cardinal. Then, based on the labeling, I had an impulse. Samskara, together maker. I made something out of it. I made something out of my perception. And then consciousness takes over. And that's all fine. It's just that we spend so much of our time in consciousness that consciousness solidifies into a self that's trying to dominate all of the others and overlooks them and trying to shape them up and trying to do whatever it can to have a life that is relatively free of pain. So sensation is usually or always in this early Buddhism either positive, negative, or neutral. It just happens like that. It's below the level of conscious awareness. And the label is just the moment when we become aware of our contact and the connecting sensation. I could have labeled it as cardinal or delightful if I didn't know what it is, or wow, that would have been a label too. That would have been a perception too, just wow. But since I've identified cardinals many times, I labeled it as cardinal. And our impulse depends on our past conditioning. My impulse was to say to my wife, there was a cardinal in the tree, because we've seen cardinals in our trees before, and we're always excited when they appear. And I delightfully told Linda, I was making something of my experience, samskara, making something of my experience. Again, storytelling is the conscious mind. It tells a story about my experience. And that's a wonderful feature of being human. Look at all the stories we tell each other, we tell ourselves, and we tell the world. But those stories gel into a solid idea about a self who is a storyteller, who's got to change the story or get those other aggregates to behave better when they're just coming as they are. So our story calcifies our experience. On the other hand, stories are good. Stories are the gel which holds cultures together. Stories are the gel which holds religion together. Religion is always about received stories. Buddhism too, received stories. Stories about Buddha, stories about Bodhidharma, stories about innumerable ancestors, including our birth story in the second and third turning, not in the first turning, but in the second and third turning, our birth story is prajnaparamita. We were all born from the goddess of non-duality, the goddess of non-separation, the goddess of connectivity. We come out of her and we return to her. And of course, the problem with storytelling is that, as I said, we just spend all our time in our stories. So yesterday we were practicing trying to bring the aggregates into view, all of them. And speaking of stories, I've told lots and lots of stories about my first teacher, Suzuki Roshi, and some stories about my second teacher, Katagiri Roshi. And Rosemary Taylor, just a couple of months ago, shared this book with me, Zen Is Right Now, which is a book of stories about my teacher, my first teacher, Suzuki Roshi. And she said, Tim, you should see this book. It's got 5 of your stories in it about it. Well, they're not all stories. Some are just vignettes. Oh, so of course I bought it, right? I read my own stories. And these stories, as we tell them, even during the same generation, they tend to get more elaborate and more, and they lose there's no such thing as recovered memory. The memory is malleable. So they become more how we'd like them to be. And of course, in religion, we're trying to express some deep truth. So our stories are an attempt to express that deep truth. So there are about 100 of his stories about him in this book. 5 are mine. And in my other book, my first book, not my second book, there are 15 stories about him. So that's what informs our practice as Zen Buddhists, these vignettes about how the ancestors lived, going all the way back to Buddha, and before Buddha to Prajnaparamita herself, how they lived, so that we can be imprinted by them and then manifest it ourselves through our sitting practice, manifest it ourselves. So it's no longer just a story, it's who we are. So stories are wonderful. And if the story I tell is not one which bolsters my sense of little separate self, which is scared and trying to protect itself, as we all have been doing in this pandemic, with this tribalism, and now with Putin replacing some of the other dictators as the adversary for so many people. So we tell ourselves stories that aren't so good because it's scary. We tell our story and we repeat those stories over and over again. And if we watch TV, if you watch CNN, I recommend only watching three minutes a day of CNN. I'm just teasing. The same story over and over again. And they're not very nice stories. They're not positive, inspirational stories that help us live this teaching, but we should watch them. We shouldn't ignore them because we need to pay attention to the bad stuff that's happening in the world so that we can help, So we have wonderful stories and we have stories that aren't so cool. So before I started, someone whose name I didn't know, just before I started my talk, was yawning. And I thought, oh, already yawning. And I haven't even started my talk. So I made contact with the yawn. I made contact, first aggregate. My sensation was a little bit of bodily contraction, even though I hadn't started to speak yet. And then perception was yawning. And then I don't know what my impulse was. I'm not even sure what my impulse was. Sometimes we don't know. I think I had an impulse to look away. I think that was my impulse, look away at the other people. And that's all part of how we live, And then story takes over and begins to say, oh, that guy must not gotten enough sleep last night. I wonder if he's going to be dozing off in my talk. Maybe he sees that I'm talking, he sees my name on the screen and he's already bored, et cetera, et cetera. Because the stories we tend to tell based on our fragile self about ourselves are more negative. There's a negative self bias to the little fragile self. And we cling to these and we reflect endlessly on them. And so we're almost never in Zen Is Right Now. And I'm laughing because all the talks, all the stories are meant to help us come to Zen Is Right Now. He has another book of stories also that came out just last year, Zen Is Right Here. That's bringing the aggregates into view. That's not having the first four aggregates smothered by the fifth one. And then we have a life, then we have vitality. So Linda and I had a delightful conversation. She's put a bunch of bird houses around the yard and a bird bath just in the last few months. A delightful conversation about how to attract more cardinals and how lucky we are during this pandemic to have one. We only have one. We're in Uptown. We're not in Minnetonka. We get one cardinal. Comes regularly and brings joy into our pandemic. 0 degrees, colorless Minnesota winter. One patch of red out there with just the black and the white. Wonderful, wonderful. So as long as our narrative doesn't override our immediate experience so that we spend so much time thinking about and looking for cardinals, there was no cardinal this morning. Oh, just sparrows. Then we don't appreciate sparrows anymore because sparrows are just black and white. They just, and they proliferate, in case you haven't seen, they take over our bird bath. Oh, now I'm fixated on sparrows. Consciousness wants only sparrow. Cardinals. Consciousness wants only cardinals. And the sparrows go away. Poor consciousness, God, give me a sparrow. Well, that's the way the little self behaves. It's the way it behaves. Bringing the aggregates into view is just the simple exercise of appreciating our beginner's mind. In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. In the expert's mind, there are truth. There are few. So now I'm going to spend a little bit of time on the second and third turning of the wheel. So the second and the third turning of the wheel happened 500 years later, roughly. This is the birth of Mahayana Buddhism. And basically, the self is brought back in. The self, which has been deconstructed in early Buddhism, is, well, actually, first, everything is deconstructed. And then out of that deconstruction, there's a discussion of Buddha nature or big self. Once we've just deconstructed everything, including those aggregates, because those become labels we get attached to. We develop stories about those. Who's doing best at bringing the aggregates into view? How can I do it better? Well, they're just constructs too. They're only constructs. So we deconstruct those, and then we settle into what's called Buddha nature, our still nature, our joyful nature, Tathagata Garbha, the womb, our womb nature, Garbha womb, Prajnaparamita, our mama right here, our center of being, our mama right here, at our deep center of being, which we overlook because we get so caught in consciousness wanting to control everything. So the self comes back, but now it's a big self. now it's bodhicitta. Now it's one interdependent whole. Now it's whole being Buddha nature, inner being. All life is inner being, and we are a manifestation of that inner being, just as we are, because everything is connected to everything else. We are that. We still are our little selves too, but ego doesn't mean to be dissed anymore. It's something, a crucially important manifestation of Buddha nature. Nothing gets dissed because this is a non-dual teaching. That's the second and third turning, non-dual teachings. So ego is important to take care of, important. And the scriptures emphasize now that we have this Buddha nature and this non-dual ability to feel connected to everything and everyone. Now we should be bodhisattvas. Now we should reach out to people who are in pain, to people who feel separate, who feel cut off, who feel isolated. And we do that. That's a bodhisattva ideal that comes with the second and the third turnings in the wheel. And there are many stories of self-sacrifice then that come up in Mahayana Buddhism, early Mahayana, and then all the way through to modern day. So many people are attracted to Zen and even to Vipassana who've been have been helping professionals, social workers, therapists, or they want to become priests. And that's all wonderful. That's all wonderful. But I want to talk this morning about self-appreciation. That means appreciation of small self within the big self, of ego. Right here in the middle of big self is ego, small self. Consciousness. Consciousness is here, but it's also right here, at least in Mahayana. Not so much in the first turning. And we burn out if we don't do a little bit of self-appreciation. We burn out. We burn out. And we also get kind of fixated on, we should be better helpers. Why didn't we help better? We should help more. And we lose our whole being Buddha nature. We lose that. And I think there are three ways in which we devalue little self as a manifestation of big self. We devalue it when we're codependent. Codependency groups in 12-step. I never knew they had 12-step groups for codependency until last year. One of you told me. I thought, oh, that's good. Codependent, that means I need to take care of you to feel okay about myself. I need you to be well and healthy, or I'm not well and healthy. And I need to do more to take care of you because I get slurped up by your neediness. I get slurped up by it. Well, that kind of self-sacrifice is not very good to be a real bodhisattva, to be a joyful bodhisattva. Well, the second way we devalue is if we had a religious upbringing that devalued taking care of the little self, of the small self, of little Tim, of little Chris, of little Janet, taking care of them, valuing them. But we had a religious upbringing. Maybe my Irish side of the family, I wasn't raised in this tradition, but my grandmother was sure disappointed. But my mother's religious upbringing, we're disciples of Christ. We put ourselves last. And if we put ourselves first, it's not okay. We can't have needs. We can't have wants. We've got to be bodhisattvas. Bodhisattva puts themselves last. Well, then we get caught by that. And we forget whole being Buddha nature, whole being big nature. All Buddha means is awake. So don't need to personify it. You can't personify it. All being, we're awake to the whole being, including taking care of our little selves. And the third way, I think, we devalue the little self is through low self-esteem, which isn't necessarily related to being codependent. It could be, or religious upbringing. It could be, but it has to do with conditioning. Some conditioning. It may not be the church. It may not be our parents, but some conditioning. It's not okay just to have needs. Not okay just to have desires. The Dalai Lama made an interesting comment, which many of you are familiar with. He said something about Westerners. Why you no like yourself? He said. I don't know. I'm paraphrasing. I don't know if that's more of a Japanese. What's something a Japanese teacher would say? Why don't you like yourself? Didn't understand why Western practitioners don't like themselves, why they don't have self-trust. And of course, many of us have been doing a metta practice, a loving kindness practice the last many years at Zen Center. But even though that was not part of our original Zen tradition, a metta practice, a loving kindness practice, which needs to include ourselves. And I've talked before about how when I do this one-to-one with people, and by the way, I'm happy to work one-to-one with any of you. When I do it, many people have the biggest problem with themselves, even a bigger problem than with someone like Vladimir Putin. They have trouble with themselves. They say, oh, Vladimir Putin's suffering. I can say to him, may he feel safe, may he feel secure, may he feel loved, because maybe if he does that, he'll get out of Ukraine. But I can't do it to myself. Well, then I have them bring a pet in, and then do it with a pet, and then sit with the pet, and then they do it we. They can usually do it we, if they have a pet. So this is an important practice for us as Americans, maybe as all Westerners. Self-appreciation, embracing ourselves and our imperfections so that we can thrive. Now I'm going to turn off the screen because I think I've done that for long enough. Let's see. You are screen sharing. Stop sharing. Okay. And just talk a little more about this. So yesterday I had people practice self-appreciation, and I pointed out the 3 elements of self-appreciation. One is bare awareness. You could say mindfulness. That's what everybody says these days, mindfulness, although there's no mindfulness in Zen tradition. That word has taken over Buddhism in the West. It's a wonderful word, but I prefer bare awareness. And one reason I prefer bare awareness is that I'm awful at mindfulness. I'm very absent-minded, in case you don't know me. I get an F grade on mindfulness. Bare awareness, which means just sitting doing nothing. Just letting the thoughts pass through without identifying with them. Well, I've been practicing for many, many years. I'm pretty good at that. Self-appreciation, bare awareness, which means paying attention to your good qualities as well as your qualities that aren't so good. But it also means not taking for granted your good qualities, which Americans tend to do. Maybe they do in Europe too. I don't know. I only know Americans. That's the first element. The second element is self-kindness, expressing your appreciation for your good qualities, as you would tell a friend that you like her good qualities. You don't have any problem telling your friend you like her good qualities. How about treating yourself as a friend? Could you think you could do that? Third element is common humanity. There's a common humanity. Part of being human is having good qualities. We all have them. And if we feel that common humanity, we don't feel isolated. We don't feel isolated. But as I said, we all have a negative bias toward ourselves. Notice when someone gives you a compliment. I remember when people gave me compliments many years ago, before I had been doing this practice day in and day out from the course of my adult life. And people would give me a compliment and I would say, but I have a lot of bad qualities too. Right? I have a lot of bad qualities too. I don't want to seem arrogant, right? I don't want to seem like I'm superior to others or I look superior to others. If someone tells you you're really a kind person, you're really a kind person. You are. Those of you who I know, you're really kind people. I feel just fortunate to know you. You're really kind. At first, I may not feel that, but at second or third, you're really kind. Someone says to you, you're really a kind person. Do you immediately say, you should see me when I'm around my partner? Or do you say, my good qualities are not a problem that needs to be fixed, so I'm not going to focus on them. You say that to yourself? Because we want to fix everything. We want to fix everything about ourselves. But what if your good qualities don't need to be fixed? And you can just acknowledge them, just enjoy them, just appreciate them. We all have them. We all have them. It's part of being human. So yesterday when I was doing the workshop with folks, someone talked about a backdraft they were experiencing after they'd done the self-appreciation exercise. A backdraft, which happens when you appreciate yourself. It can happen. Old pain from the past comes up when you appreciate yourself. You might even feel queasy and anxious or short of breath. This person didn't. But this person just said to me, shouldn't this make me feel better? This made me feel worse to do the self-appreciation exercise. I'm not laughing at that person. This happens to all of us because we're so embedded in negative self-bias. We just get embedded in it. So I had a one-to-one I was mentoring named Danny, and I was doing this meta thing with him, and I had him put his hand on his heart to help him speak kindly to himself. And he said, I don't want to do that anymore, Tim. I feel worse. Huh. So we didn't do that. Didn't do that. Well, instead of just appreciating ourselves, we intellectualize, we get agitated, we withdraw, we space out, we criticize ourselves or others. But we can, in our Zazen practice, just come back to being the whole being Buddha nature that we are by turning attention to our butt on the cushion or the chair, breathing through our lower belly, and appreciating that little self is part of big self. They're not two. Everything is inner being. You think, oh, it doesn't include little self. Little self is just a conglomeration. Well, everything is conglomerated and unconglomerating, so don't worry about it. So, and in the broader context, why do you have self-appreciation? Maybe because of all the karma that you've done in the past, all the karma that maybe your friends have done, or maybe a parent did, or teachers. People helped you develop your good qualities. So you can be proud of your good qualities knowing that they come interpersonally from experiences. And if you haven't had that experiences with parents, some of us didn't have it with parents. Maybe you got it from a grandparent, something some of us didn't have it with grandparents. Maybe you got it from a teacher, or maybe you got it from just going to the movies every Saturday and watching your favorite comedies over and over again, as I used to do. Much better than hanging out around home. And I began to laugh and appreciate myself. Never know, never know. All the karma ever created by me. Now, when we say that, downstairs we're talking about negative karma. But what about all the karma ever created by me that's positive? I now fully avow that karma too. You have positive karma, or you wouldn't be sitting here right now. So my parents did pass on a little bit of this stuff to me. My mother had a little bit of appreciation of others and a little bit of appreciation of herself. But then I also had my Zen teacher, whom I met when I was not quite 21. Our karma happens in different ways. And it's easier to accept our good karma when we realized how intertwined we are with others, as I said. Marianne Williamson says, we were all meant to shine as children do. We were all meant to shine as children do. She says, as we let our own light shine, we give others permission to do the same. It's true. It's true. You just share the haiku that you wrote, or the little piece of artwork you did. And you think, oh, I don't want to share it. I don't want anybody to see it. It comes from you. It comes from your inner being. Maybe your inner being is flawed. Show your flawed inner being. It's beautiful. The best poems show the flaws. The best artwork shows the flaws. We're all meant to shine as children do. As we let our own light shine, we give others permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. That's pretty good, isn't it? Our presence liberates each other. Liberation upon liberation on liberation, just hanging out together, appreciating ourselves and appreciating others as we hang out together. We really missed hanging out together. Oh, boy, we've been in this forced monastery. We didn't sign up for this monastery. I thought I finished monastery by the time I was 25, and here I am, 77. I got put in a new monastery I did not sign up for. Anybody feel that? We're going to be free from this monastery pretty soon, I think. Oh, I'll get my hopes up. Consciousness will take over. Because we don't know. The pandemic is our teacher. It's showing us the flow of all life. We don't know, but we can bring the aggregates into view. They're always coming into view. We can live in the present. And we can value the past and the future as manifestations of consciousness. So one last story from consciousness. This is a story that I've talked about before, and a story that my friend said, boy, you embellished on that story since you told that to me 20 years ago. I think it's mostly made up. And I said, no, I remember it. I don't know. He said, well, then why did you tell it to me differently 20 years ago? Anyway, here's the story. Those of you who've been around me for a while have heard the stories. So my teacher wanted me to, it might even be in my first book, this story, wanted me to drive him from San Francisco to Hillsborough, which was a really wealthy suburb, south of San Francisco, to meet with a woman who was interested in learning about the Dharma. So I drove him down. He had his black robes on, his black traveling robes. And we were at the bottom of the hill, and she looked like she lived in this sort of palace at the top of the hill. And he said, you stay in car, I'll go top of the hill to her house. I said, okay, although I offered to go. I don't know why he didn't take me. So then he was only gone about 7 or 8 minutes. He came back and he looked at me, and I said, oh, how was it? He said, oh, wrong woman. She think I there to wash her window. He was Japanese. He was dressed in black. And growing up in California, before I met Suzuki, I knew lots of Japanese people. But remember, they'd all been put in concentration camps, in internment camps. So they'd lost everything. So they were gardeners. They were cleaning women. We had a Japanese cleaning woman in my house when I was growing up. They were laborers. They were, I suppose, window washers. And then he laughed. He said, she think I there to wash window. Too bad I no bring squeegee. That's self-appreciation, right? As big self appreciating little self. Little self appreciating big self. Too bad I no bring squeegee. Then a few months later, I used to drive him back and forth between Palo Alto and San Francisco. Every time we'd pass Hillsborough, he'd say, wonder if that woman needs window clean. I know have squeegee today. And then he'd laugh again. Now, my friend told me that 80% of this story is just made up, but I remember it. It really happened, you know. It did happen. That's how we develop mythology. That's how we've received this teaching from our teachers, and they've received it all the way back to our great mama Prajnaparamita, who is giving birth to it all the time. So that's the wonderful side of consciousness. And that's what I want to say today. And there's a little bit of time for questions. Let's see. I think I want to start with people in the big room downstairs. See who has questions or comments. People in the there's a let's not. People, well, I don't know. I can hear my voice twice. I don't know what that is. Anyway, I guess for the big group of people online for comments or stories about mountain rushing and some other activity, whether it's true or not. Go ahead, share it. And we'll just sit here quietly in silence and Buddhism we like. So if nobody has anything to say, we can just do 3 or 4 minutes more of it. Just nonsense. Anybody, anything. Killian.
Well, I've heard you tell that story before.
Killian, can you speak a little louder?
Yeah, but there's an echo.
Yeah, can you say that again? I think the echo's a little better now. Say it again.
Well, I've heard you tell that story before about Suzuki Roshi cleaning the windows. And I felt embarrassed, like
Ah,
how, you look up to him as a great teacher. And her view is to kind of treat him as someone that was helping her out in a subservient way.
In a what way?
In a subservient way.
Yes, it's an embarrassment. It's very embarrassing what we did to the Japanese people. It's embarrassing. They had businesses, they had restaurants. Some of them were successful teachers. As a Californian, are you a Californian too? I know you lived in California, but as a Californian, no, you're not. You lived there for years. I'm embarrassed by it.
Yeah.
I'm embarrassed. That's a whole different side to it.
Yeah, for me.
And we're still doing that to immigrants.
Yeah.
And these Japanese people were not even recent immigrants. Some of them have been in California two, 3, 4, 5 generations. It's embarrassing. I'm ashamed for us. I'm ashamed. But there it is. We did it. We did it. We forgot inner being. We forgot it. I didn't do it because I was not born yet. I didn't even know when I was a kid why the Japanese just were the janitors. I didn't know why they were just the gardeners in the cleaning room. I didn't find that out. We didn't learn that in school. That's embarrassing too. Thank you, Killian. Thank you.
Well, I had a little more to say too.
Sure.
And I've experienced that myself, practicing Zen and wanting to learn Japanese joinery. So there's kind of I had to let go of that, thinking that I'm better, in order to learn something new.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That was wonderful. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
These skills, these ancient skills, they take a lot more patience and persistence than Americans generally have. And somehow you have found that patience and persistence within you. And now that's kind of your artwork. It's beautiful. Killian did all the good woodwork that's come with the renovations done by Killian.
I was talking with Huitsu Suzuki
Uh-huh.
in the dining room at San Francisco Zen Center when there was a new abbot being installed. And his wife, she's like, I told him I was into Japanese joinery. His wife, she goes, he has 6 planes, like Japanese hand planes. They take a lot of skill
Ah.
to be able to use.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah.
Anyway, thanks for your talk, Tim.
Oh, you're very welcome. And thanks for bringing up the shadow side, which is present right now. And as we get more fearful in our country, we divide ourselves more and more from each other, more and more. And we're condescending toward the other, whether it be an immigrant or people who believe in Donald Trump or whomever it is. We condescend toward them. But we can come back. And that's what this practice is about, just coming back to this deeper calmness, which embraces big self and no self and small self and doesn't even know the difference. Just as here, just as here. Well, is there anything more? Americans are uncomfortable with silence. Even Americans who practice Zen, they think, "Oh, I did my Zazen. Now what's Tim doing sitting here? It's time for me to go. Why are we just sitting here doing nothing?" Well, isn't that what we do? Isn't that our practice to sit and do nothing? Oh, time's up. Tim, time's up. Is time ever up? Anyway. Just 5 or 6 more deep breaths, and then I'll turn it over to the dawn. Breathing from our bellies, breathing from our bellies. Thank you. Thank you.